Welcome back to the Freemouse MC YouTube channel, and we are today here with a bike that's quite a lot of motorcycle for very little money, and that is the Kawasaki Z1000 that was produced from 2003 all the way to 2006, and this is an amazing bike on the used market that you can get for 3,000 to 4,500 euros. And what a bike that is, because I have to say, how it's standing here now in front of me, I have to say this is the most beautiful machine from the Y2K era when it comes to naked bikes. There's a design that's very hard to pull off. We all now got the bikes that kind of resulted out of this design language with the weird front-looking headlights, but this bike managed to pull it off because of its amazing colorway with this brushed aluminum looking paint job with the stainless steel exhaust, which with like 4 exhaust ends with the very small openings almost looks like a 2-stroke exhaust, which is so beautiful. And the way that the paint job changes colors when you look at it, and when light hits the paint job, it sometimes has a pink pearl effect, sometimes a dark green. It is so nice, and the bike doesn't just look good. It also has the power figures to back it up. It has 127 horsepower and 95 newton meters of torque, and all that with fully adjustable suspension. That's stuff that you pay loads of money for today. On top of that, the bike comes with 0 electronic helpers, how motorcycles used to be, and it has this very impressive stance when it stands in front of you. It has this typical Kawasaki Segomi design language of bikes just appearing very big and massive, and it can also back that up with a 190 millimeter rear tire, bigger than the usual 180. And what a beautiful bike, how it's standing here. And this bike has been provided by a friend of the channel who also gave me his VFR some time ago, Cher. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Yeah, it's really nice. And you told me about this bike, that you bought this bike for quite cheap and restored it. So for how much did you pay for it, and what did you do to it to get it back on the road?
I bought it, I thought it was attractive for 350 euros.
Okay.
I thought, oh yeah, okay, that sounds great, you know. But what happened afterwards was an economical disaster.
Okay. I mean, 350 euro bikes usually are quite close to economical disaster.
Yeah, I thought I'd only need to invest about 1,000 euros to get it on the road. I didn't realize I had to invest 3,000 to get it to the way it is now.
Yeah, so you basically paid the normal market price plus the work you put in.
Yeah. I mean, it's still not worth more than 2.5, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
That sounds really nice. And from talking to you about your VFR, I know you're quite big into the whole suspension thing, and you've also upgraded the suspension on this machine. What have you done to it?
Well, let's start with the rear shock. It's got a new YSS shock absorber in there, and it's got new internals in the front, not just springs, but bushers as well, as seals and lots of other little bits and pieces. Previously, when I first got the bike running, the brakes were seized. It used to fall into the corners, and you'd have to catch it to prevent yourself from landing on the deck. And I thought, okay, got to give this some serious attention. So there's been a lot of painstaking work because some of the bolts were seized.
Yeah.
You know, this thing has been standing around, I don't know how many years. There was even life in the air filter box. Alone, just on the front forks, there's about 2.5, 3 hours work just for the forks.
Okay.
You know, it's got new head race bearings. It's now stable. It won't fall into a corner and land you in the shit. Same with the rear as well. At the moment, because it's all new, I've completed it last week. So you'll notice when you're riding it, the springing has to bed in. It's not quite. That's why the suspension setting front and rear is soft, but it feels hard. Okay,
that's pretty interesting. I'm very curious how this bike is going to ride. What is the seat height on it again?
It's 810 millimeters, 805, 810 millimeters.
So 805 millimeters. So let's see how I can sit on the bike. For context, I'm 6'5" or 1.95 m. And I have to say, I sit very comfortably on the bike. The bike is very leaned forward for a naked bike with no clip-ons, but with like a traditional handlebar, but so far it feels quite good. So let's see how this bike does on the road. So I'm now here with the Kawasaki Z1000 on the open road, and so far I have to say the bike handles pretty nice. It has a heavier feel to it, typical Kawasaki, and the radiuses this bike is driving around the turns feel pretty nice. It feels like you have a pretty big spread of like lean angle, that you can lean pretty far to both sides, so you're working the bike a lot. Feels nice. And Kawasaki's middle child engine of the big engines, the 953cc engine, does a very good job. It feels you have a lot of newton meters. Like it feels like you can pass relatively easily, and it's in any gear basically. And I want to see if we can do that actually right about now. Yeah, you see, even with not a lot of road, you can very easily pass. The bike feels pretty nice on the side of the tire with its big 190 tire at the rear. Ooh. But I have to say, it's definitely fun. Let's turn around and drive that road again. The turning radius is so-so, but it still works. It's a bit hard to get the leverage onto the handlebars because they are quite narrow, but that can be relatively practical for street riding, for like going through traffic and everything. But the newton meters on the bike feel nice. The power you have from the bottom. When leaning this bike, you sometimes have to counter steer a bit more in the middle of the turn. That also feels typical Kawasaki-ish. That I even had that on the new bikes from them, on the Versa 1000, and I also had that on the Z900 RS. Woo, this is fun. Yeah. All when braking into a turn, I have to say the 4-piston brake calipers that you have on each of the 300mm front discs do their job pretty well. It feels like dropping an anchor, and even though the motorcycle now does not have ABS, it still feels very manageable, and I have not had the rear or anything lock up on me. You feel a bit that the bike is old, like you have the feel of, yes, this is 2003. But I think that's fine, and for the amount of money. Or the 4-cylinder is just really fun. But also when just cruising on the bike, I have to say the bike feels relatively comfortable. They're more comfortable naked bikes because you still are leaned forward quite a bit. You will notice that on a longer day of riding. But you have a good grip on the tanks with your legs because like the tank is pretty wide and you can grab it nicely with your thighs. One thing when riding the Kawasaki Z1000 that is pretty obvious is that the bike feels heavier than it actually is because of its very big proportions. Many people wanted to make the bike lighter and took off the stock exhaust. But this motorcycle is from the beginning of fuel-injected motorcycles, and it's pretty hard to get the bike running right without the stock exhaust. So, if you are interested in this bike, I would definitely consider keeping the exhaust and just living with the pretty heavy feel of the bike, which can also be pretty nice. And in my opinion, the exhaust is already also a relative big plus. And from the feel of this very early injection technology, for me it basically feels like a still carbureted bike because it feels pretty raw when twisting the throttle, but there's already some adjustments going on in the electricity. Cher, the owner of the bike, told me that he had a problem with the hoses for the air, and that the bike was pulling air there and it was adjusting the mixture on its own. So yeah, all in all, I would say try to keep the really beautiful stock exhaust, which in my opinion also looks quite a lot like an old two-stroke exhaust with the very little openings at the end. One thing I still want to get into, that the bike feels pretty top heavy and you need to move all that weight also of the heavy exhaust around. So you really need to give the bike clear inputs, and it drives a bit like a boat. It's from the feeling very similar to driving a very heavy car with still very good suspension. It's kind of a M5 type feel, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something you need to know. And if you're into that, then this bike can be pretty interesting for you. It's definitely fun to drive around the turns, and it also drives quite rapidly. I think it's just important to know that most likely something like a KTM 790 or a 650 most likely outmaneuvers here at the end of the day. All the bike feels very planted on the road, and that you need to really work the bike to get it to lean over, combined with the big rear tire, gives it pretty much a pendulum feel. Like swinging the bike from side to side through the turns feels pretty much how looking at one of those piano pendulums feels like. That's kind of how it feels like to drive. So we are now back from riding the Kawasaki Z1000, and what an amazing bike it is to ride. I definitely have to say it sits so stable on the road, and we just also went through a traffic jam on the way back from the curvy roads, and it's because of its added weight so like stable, and you don't have to do many corrections, and with the more narrow handlebars goes really nicely through traffic, and you get quite a lot of motorcycle for quite a little money. But of course, if you get a bike on the used market, you most likely will have to do some things to it. In general, what are like the mechanical weak points of the bike that you've experienced now?
The suspension and brakes, that was more time consuming than I had anticipated. I was hoping, brakes, put in new pads, because they're a bit maybe oily or whatever. But the brakes were seized, and alone in the brakes, that was all three calipers. You're not just changing brake pads, but you're changing the internals. So we're looking at €170 and about 2.5, 3 hours work. That's the sort of thing you can do at home. Yeah, that's easy. The suspension, the back is very easy to change. It needed a new shock, because the suspension front and rear was shot. When I was riding it, it wanted to throw you straight down on the deck. So that had to be changed. But the front, you're not going to be able to do that at home. You can take your forks off, give it to a dealer and say, hey, I want new springs, I want new bushes. So, and this is what a private owner can do. He's probably in a position to take the forks off and take it to some bike shop that he knows. Yeah. Because you're never going to be able to compress that at home and put in the new stuff in. So, even myself, I've got experience. I had to take it to a bike shop. And your forks as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm currently actually taking my forks to a dealership to get the new sealing, the new simmer rings to the Kawasaki. at the end of the ride, we started to lose a little bit of oil on the side of the cylinder head, which is most likely due to like a missed O-ring, small mistake while maintenance or something. How in general was it to work on that area of the bike, like adjusting the valves? Was that doable? What was your experience?
Yeah, you need to make sure that everything is off, so you have the room. Because I was changing the fluid, the cooling fluid in it, that gives you more space. It's very, very tight in there. I also did that at the workshop. I could never have done it here on the yard where we are. You need patience, and you have to work methodically. You have to have experience, which lucky enough I am. I worked as a mechanic. And take your time, look at it, do your measurements, write them down on the shim chart which I created.
Okay.
It's easy to make, and then start changing them, and then again measuring. You know, did I put too much? Did I put too thicker shim or whatever? Yeah. And the cam chain, doing the cam chain tensioner is easy. But the cam chain runs on the side, and taking that out was a real bitch, you know. It's like bit by bit by bit with a special hook and everything, because it's a high void chain. It's not like a chain like you have on the rear wheel. You've got like lots of different plates on it, so you're lifting one bit over and doing that was time consuming. So alone in the engine, that's another 3 hours work as well.
It doesn't just sound consuming time-wise, it also sounds consuming money-wise, because that's stuff that you cannot do at home anymore at that point. Yeah, you also mentioned earlier behind the scenes that it was pretty hard to get the tool for adjusting the shims inside.
Yeah, it's very, very tight in there. You can get it in,
okay,
but you have to be very, very patient.
Yeah,
you know, until you actually get a reading with the feeler gauges. Okay, how tight or how loose are they?
Yeah.
The danger is not too much when they're too loose. The danger is actually when they're too tight.
Okay.
Because after a while, the valves will go up in the cylinder to make everything tighter. Mm-hmm. So if it's a little bit loose, you know, you can get away with it, leave it. But if it's too tight, it's alarm signals.
Okay, that's really good to know. But now, all in all, we have a really good overview of the Kawasaki Z1000. It rides great. It's Kawasaki typical, a bit on the heavier side. I really like the special stuff about it, like the really special colorway. This is now this kind of brushed aluminum style. There are also other pretty wild colors, like an orange, and I think also like a pretty wild green as well. And I really like the style of the stainless steel exhaust. That thing is not going to rust. It is pretty heavy. Most people have put them off. They don't really run properly without them. I think a good tip for people when they want to get this bike is use that kind of as bargaining leverage when buying them, and also like definitely ask to get the exhaust with the bike. It makes stuff a lot easier because they are like $50-$60 to buy them on eBay then. Yeah,
this is really strange because new at Kawasaki you're looking at something like well over 700 euros, just under 8. Let's say 750 for argument's sake, new for just one side.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, when you look at eBay for one side, 60 if it's a scratched one, or if it's a good one it'll be about 120, which also isn't much for a stainless steel system.
That's pretty impressive. I think that's because the bike has been continued after the 2006 model and with slight changes with like ABS and so on, with like this exhaust. So it's kind of at this weird point of being right between 10 years old. So Kawasaki still makes the parts themselves and just used parts basically on eBay. So it's a weird in-between position. But with the stainless steel exhaust, I have to say it's a very, very beautiful bike. Every time I'm like a bit away from it, or when I took a photo of it with my phone, it always looks beautiful. And that especially for a bike with the Y2K styling, with the weird front that many people are not a fan of. It really pulls it off. It really looks very good, and that's so hard to do for like a naked bike. And I think from the time only the Buell XB12 kind of comes to mind that also manages to pull off a very good naked bike look with 2000 styling with like the transparent tank. But that bike is almost impossible to sit on for a person who's a bit taller, and is kind of a whole niche thing on its own. So I think this bike is really kind of the king of looks when it comes to the 2000s naked bikes.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this wasn't a motorcycle I planned on buying.
Yeah.
You know, I was, Marcus, the shop, said, owner of the bike shop, hey, Shep, go down to this dealer, pick up a bike, we're going to break it for spares. So I looked at it and I thought, well, it ain't too bad. Yeah, you can keep it, have it for my price, and for you guys out there in the world, like, think twice if you're going to restore, or if you're going to do that, then it means you're going to keep that bike at least 5 years.
Okay, I think that's really good to know, but on the other hand, it's a good testimony to the looks of the bike that it made you be like, yeah, this one looks nice. And I really, one last thing before we wrap this up, I really have to compliment the color, because the different pearl effects in the color and how they react with different light during different times of the day, during different light influences like a gas station, or now right here a bit of the sun or a street light, is incredible. It always glows in a slightly different color, and it has a very special glaze to it that is very, very nicely like mixes with the look of the stainless steel exhaust. Just amazing. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Quite a lot of bike for the money, I have to say. I think this is the whole paint and visuals thing is something that you really notice when you stand in the bike in person. So you're going to see that if you take a look at the bike in person. If you like this video, definitely feel free to subscribe and like. And if you have a motorcycle that you would like me to review, especially in Eastern Europe, definitely feel free to write me an email. And also all the people who have a motorcycle from the used market, don't feel shy to write me an email. I love making videos on specifically those bikes, as they're just good fun always. And see you guys in the next one.